There's a particular kind of humiliation that comes with watching someone count your money in public. Not literally, no one was rifling through my wallet, but metaphorically, in the way my stepmother's eyes tracked my hand as I placed a crisp $20 bill into the donation box at the charity gala's entrance. Her lips pursed, her eyebrows lifted just a fraction. And I knew, with the certainty that comes from 15 years of these interactions, that she was already calculating how to weaponize this moment against me. I'm Shay Utley. I'm 41 years old. And I've spent the better part of 2 decades investigating organized crime, human trafficking rings, and domestic terrorism as a senior agent with the FBI. My family thinks I'm a low-level data analyst who sits in a cubicle somewhere, probably filing reports about parking violations. The grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel was decorated with string lights tonight, thousands of them, draped from the ceiling beams and wrapped around support columns, creating a warm amber glow that was supposed to feel intimate, but mostly just made everyone look slightly jaundiced. The event was for the Children's Hope Foundation, my stepmother Patricia's favorite charity, the one she chaired with the kind of zealous dedication usually reserved for religious conversion or pyramid schemes. I'd debated not coming, had spent the entire morning staring at my phone, drafting and deleting excuses, work emergency, migraine, sudden onset plague. But my father had called 3 days ago, using that careful tone he always used when he was trying to pretend Patricia hadn't put him up to something. "It would mean a lot to Patricia if you came," he'd said. "She's worked so hard on this event, and it's been a while since we've all been together." Translation: Patricia had complained about my absence at the last 5 family gatherings, and he was tired of hearing about it. So here I was, black cocktail dress from 3 years ago, minimal jewelry, sensible heels I could run in if necessary, occupational habit, not paranoia. And I'd made my donation at the entrance, just like everyone else, dropping my $20 into the crystal bowl with the same casual gesture I'd used to tip a bartender. $20. I could hear Patricia's internal monologue as clearly as if she'd spoken it aloud. $20, how embarrassing, how perfectly embarrassing. The thing is, the 20 wasn't about what I could afford. It was about sending a specific message, one Patricia wouldn't understand because she'd never had to think strategically about money. She'd married into it twice, first to my biological mother's brother, then to my father after my mother died. Her entire financial philosophy could be summed up as, flaunt it, spend it, judge others by it. But I'd learned different lessons. In undercover work, you become whoever the situation requires. Sometimes that's a high roller throwing cash around. Sometimes it's someone barely scraping by. The key is authenticity, believing the role so completely that everyone else believes it too. Tonight, I was playing myself. The version my family had constructed from assumptions, misunderstandings, and willful ignorance. The struggling government worker who couldn't afford to be generous. "Shay!" Patricia materialized beside me, all teeth and perfume, her silk gown probably costing more than my monthly mortgage. She air-kissed near my cheek, close enough to be seen as affectionate, but not close enough for actual contact. "You made it, and you look comfortable." Comfortable. The kind of word that sounded like a compliment but operated like a scalpel. "Patricia, the venue looks lovely. Doesn't it?" She beamed, already scanning the room for more important people to acknowledge. "We've raised almost $500,000 already. Can you imagine? $500,000 for the children. Of course, some people have been more generous than others." There it was, the first cut, delivered with surgical precision. I smiled. "That's wonderful. The foundation does important work." Her attention snagged on something across the room. "Oh, there's Senator Whitmore." "I absolutely must speak with her. Do mingle, darling. There's wine at the bar. I'm sure you can afford a glass or 2. She floated away, leaving that last comment hanging in the air like secondhand smoke. I could afford considerably more than a glass or 2 of wine. The FBI paid well at my level. GS 15, Step 10, with locality adjustments and hazard pay that accumulated during the months I spent in deep cover operations. Add to that the performance bonuses, the speaking fees from the training sessions I occasionally taught at Quantico, and the consulting work I'd done for 3 different federal task forces. But Patricia didn't know that I'd just closed on a second property in Virginia, a rental investment that was already generating passive income. Didn't know that my retirement accounts were robust enough to make my financial advisor smile every time we met. Didn't know that the comfortable dress I was wearing was comfortable because I had chosen comfort over ostentation, not because I couldn't afford ostentation. I made my way to the bar, ordered a club soda, I never drank on duty, and in a way I was always on duty, and found a spot near one of the windows where I could observe without being obviously isolated. The room was full of people I vaguely recognized from previous family events, Patricia's friends from the country club, her tennis partners, the women from her book club, who'd probably never read a book that wasn't featured on a morning talk show. They moved through the space like schools of fish, glittering and synchronized, breaking apart and reforming in new configurations based on some social algorithm I'd never bothered to learn. My father was holding court near the silent auction tables, looking distinguished in his tuxedo, playing the role of proud, supportive husband. He'd been a corporate lawyer before he retired, still was, technically, doing consulting work that kept him busy enough to avoid too much time alone with Patricia. We'd been close once, before he remarried, before Patricia had decided that closeness between us somehow threatened her position in the family hierarchy. Shea Utley. As I live and breathe. The voice came from behind me, male, familiar in that unpleasant way that makes your shoulders tense. I turned to find Trevor Nesbitt, Patricia's son from her first marriage. My stepbrother, technically, though we'd never been anything approaching familial. He was 38, worked in commercial real estate, and had the kind of aggressive handshake that was meant to establish dominance. Trevor. Didn't expect to see you here, figured charity galas weren't really your scene. He looked me up and down with the assessing gaze of someone inventorying assets. Then again, Mom did say she'd guilted Dad into guilting you. How's the government gig, still pushing papers? Something like that. Must be tough, living on that government salary. What do they pay you, 40K? 50? He laughed, the sound carrying across the nearby conversations. Several people glanced over. I just closed a deal that'll net me more in commission than you probably make in 5 years. But hey, public service, right? Very noble. I took a sip of my club soda and said nothing. This was Trevor's pattern. Establish superiority, wait for a reaction, escalate based on response. I'd interviewed hundreds of people who operated on similar principles. The key was not to engage. Although, he continued, clearly disappointed by my lack of defensiveness, I guess everyone has to start somewhere. Maybe you can transition to private sector eventually. I know some people in corporate security probably pay better than whatever you're doing now. Corporate security. The irony was exquisite. Last month, I'd been the lead agent on a task force that took down a corporate security firm that had been selling classified information to foreign bidders. We'd seized $40 million in assets, arrested 12 people, and prevented what would have been a catastrophic breach of military technology. But sure, maybe I should look into corporate security. I'll keep that in mind, I said. Trevor lingered a moment longer, clearly hoping for more of a reaction, then wandered off when someone more interesting caught his attention. I watched him go, cataloging the interaction in the mental file I kept on family dynamics. Not because I needed it for work, but because it helped me maintain the necessary emotional distance. The evening progressed the way these events always did. Dinner was served, chicken or fish, pick your protein, accompanied by vegetables that had been steamed to within an inch of their lives, and a dessert that was more architectural achievement than actual food. Speeches were given. Patricia took the microphone and thanked everyone for their generous contributions to this vital cause. She made particular mention of the, quote, major donors, who'd given 5 figures or more, reading their names from a printed list, with the reverence usually reserved for war memorials. My name was not on that list. I sat at a table near the back with distant relatives and family friends who'd also been relegated to the cheap seats, made polite conversation, smiled at the appropriate moments. and thought about the wire transfer I'd arranged 3 weeks ago, sent from an account that wasn't connected to my name in any obvious way. $200,000 routed through my attorney's trust account, marked as an anonymous contribution to the Children's Hope Foundation. Anonymous because I'd learned long ago that visibility in my line of work was dangerous. Anonymous because I didn't need recognition. Anonymous because I wanted to help the actual children, not feed Patricia's ego. But mostly anonymous because I'd known, with absolute certainty, that Patricia would eventually say something that would make the reveal devastatingly perfect. After dinner, as people milled around the dessert table and bar, Patricia found me again. She was holding a glass of champagne, her fourth or fifth of the evening, judging by the slight looseness in her movements. "Shay, darling, come. I want you to meet some people." She linked her arm through mine with the kind of forced intimacy that always preceded public humiliation. She guided me toward a cluster of her friends, women in their 50s and 60s, all wearing dresses that cost more than my car payment, all regarding me with the polite curiosity you'd give to a moderately interesting museum exhibit. "Ladies, this is my stepdaughter, Shay. She works for the government. Something with computers, I think?" Patricia's tone suggested computers were slightly distasteful, like discussing bathroom habits. "How interesting," one of the women said, in a voice that meant the exact opposite. "Shay made a donation tonight," Patricia continued, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper that was clearly meant to carry. $20. How embarrassing. That's all she has. The words landed like stones in water, creating ripples of awkward silence that spread outward through the group. One woman made a small, sympathetic noise. Another examined her champagne glass with sudden, intense interest. A third gave me the kind of pitying look usually reserved for lost puppies and natural disasters. And Patricia stood there, waiting for my reaction, her expression hovering somewhere between concern and satisfaction. I could have walked away. Should have, probably. It would have been the mature thing, the dignified thing. Let Patricia have her moment, let her friends think whatever they wanted to think. Maintain the peace for the sake of family harmony. But I was tired of the performance. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of protecting the feelings of people who'd never bothered to protect mine. Before I could respond, the event coordinator, a nervous young man with a clipboard and headset, appeared at Patricia's elbow. "Mrs. Utley, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're ready for the final announcement. The anonymous donor recognition?" Patricia's face brightened. "Oh yes, ladies, you'll want to see this. Our largest donor of the evening. $200,000? Completely anonymous. Can you imagine?" She practically skipped toward the small stage area, her friends following like ducklings. I stayed where I was, my heart rate steady, my breathing controlled. The coordinator tapped the microphone, creating that hollow, thudding sound that made everyone turn their attention forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just one more moment, we have one final acknowledgement to make. Tonight, we received our largest single donation, a contribution of $200,000 from an anonymous donor. While we cannot reveal their identity publicly, they have agreed to stand for recognition. So if everyone could please stand and help us thank this incredibly generous individual." The room erupted in applause. That automatic response to being told someone rich had done something vaguely benevolent. And I stood up. Slowly, deliberately, from my table at the back of the room. The applause continued for a moment, then began to falter as people realized who was standing. Realized that the woman standing wasn't one of the obvious suspects, not Senator Whitmore, not the CEO of that pharmaceutical company, not any of the other wealthy attendees who looked like they could write a check that size without noticing. Just me, in my comfortable dress, with my $20 visible donation and my invisible $200,000 actual donation. Patricia's face went through a series of expressions that I would remember for the rest of my life. Confusion, disbelief, understanding, horror. The champagne glass in her hand tilted, and golden liquid sloshed onto her silk gown, but she didn't seem to notice. Trevor's mouth literally fell open. Actually opened, like a bad actor in a comedy sketch. My father, standing near the silent auction tables, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise, certainly, but maybe something else too. Something like pride, or recognition, or the dawning realization that he'd never actually known his daughter at all. The coordinator, bless him, kept the applause going, gesturing for people to maintain their standing ovation. The room full of strangers applauded me. Not for who I was, not for my FBI work, not for any of the actual important things I'd done with my life. Just for having money and being willing to part with a chunk of it for a good cause. But that was fine, let them applaud the money. I wasn't here for their validation. I was here for the look on Patricia's face. I was here for the moment when her carefully constructed narrative about me, the struggling, embarrassing, pitiable stepdaughter, shattered like glass striking concrete. The applause finally died down. People resumed their seats. The coordinator thanked everyone again and declared the evening a tremendous success. And the normal sounds of a charity gala winding down filled the space, glasses clinking, conversations resuming, chairs scraping against the floor. I stayed standing for a moment longer, letting the reality sink in for everyone who'd witnessed Patricia's comment, letting them recalculate, letting them understand that the $20 had been a choice, not a limitation. Then I gathered my small evening bag and walked toward the exit. I made it about halfway across the room before Patricia intercepted me. She'd shed the champagne-stained outer layer of her dress somehow, was now just in what looked like an expensive slip. Her face was blotchy, her careful makeup disrupted. "That was you," she said. Statement, not question. "The anonymous donation, that was you." "Yes." "But how? You can't. You don't have that kind of money." "Actually, I do. I just don't make a habit of discussing my finances with people who've made it clear they're more interested in judgment than connection." She reached out, grabbed my arm, not hard, but firmly enough to communicate desperation. "You deliberately embarrassed me, in front of my friends, in front of everyone." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up at her face. "You embarrassed yourself, Patricia. I just stopped pretending to be who you wanted me to be." "But why? Why the secrecy? Why let us all think?" "Think what? That I was struggling? That I needed help? That I was somehow less than everyone else because I didn't flaunt my success?" I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I let you think those things because correcting you was more exhausting than the assumptions. But you know what? I'm done. I'm done being small so you can feel big. I'm done pretending my life is somehow less meaningful because it doesn't fit your definition of success." My father appeared then, having crossed the room at something close to a run. "Shay, sweetheart, when did you?" "Dad." I looked at him. Really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. I've been a senior agent with the FBI for the last 8 years. Before that, I was a regular agent for 6 years. I investigate organized crime, human trafficking, domestic terrorism. I've testified before Congress. I've received commendations from 2 different directors. And I make enough money that a $200,000 donation doesn't significantly impact my financial planning. He stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. "FBI? But you always said you worked in data analysis." "I do work in data analysis, among other things. But you never asked for details. None of you did. You were all so comfortable with your assumptions that you never bothered to find out who I actually was." Patricia made a small, choked sound. "This whole time you've been lying to us." "No," I said firmly. "I've been protecting myself from your judgment. There's a difference. And I've been protecting my work, because what I do requires discretion and security clearance, and about a dozen other things that don't mix well with family members who measure worth in visible displays of wealth." Trevor had materialized somewhere behind Patricia, looking pale. "You're an FBI agent?" "Senior special agent, technically. Working out of the DC field office." I looked at my watch. A simple Timex, the kind that could get wet and dusty and banged around without breaking. "And I have a briefing at 7 a.m. tomorrow, so I'm going to leave now." "Shay, wait," my father's voice cracked. "Please, can we talk about this, really talk?" I considered it. Considered sitting down and explaining everything. The cases, the clearances, the reasons I'd maintained the silence. Considered trying to rebuild something from the wreckage of their assumptions. but I was tired, so incredibly tired. Maybe, I said, but not tonight. And not until everyone in this family is ready to actually listen, instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. I walked toward the exit, aware of the eyes following me, the whispered conversations beginning to percolate through the crowd. By tomorrow, everyone who attended tonight would know. The story would spread, would probably get exaggerated and distorted in the retelling, like all good stories do. But that was fine. Let them talk. Let them recalibrate their understanding of me. Let them realize that the quiet woman they'd dismissed, the struggling relative they'd pitied, had been something else entirely all along. I pushed through the hotel doors into the cool evening air. My phone buzzed. A work email. Something about the briefing tomorrow, preliminary intelligence reports I needed to review. I pulled up the message, skimmed it, started mentally organizing my approach for tomorrow's meeting. Behind me, the gala continued. Inside that warm, amber-lit room, Patricia was probably holding court, explaining to her friends how she'd had no idea, how Shay was always so secretive, how this was all somehow a surprise to everyone. Maybe it was. Maybe they genuinely never noticed the discrepancies, the gaps in my cover story, the way I deflected every question about my actual work. Or maybe they'd simply never cared enough to look. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. I'd spent 15 years being underestimated by dangerous criminals, and I'd learned to use that underestimation as a weapon. Turned out the same skills worked equally well on family. My car was parked 3 blocks away. I'd walked from my apartment, enjoying the evening air before what I knew would be an exhausting event. As I walked, I thought about the $20 bill I'd placed in that crystal bowl, about the symbolism of it, the careful calibration. $20. Just enough to be seen as participating. Just little enough to confirm every assumption Patricia had ever made about me. And $200,000, invisible and anonymous, doing the actual work I cared about. Helping children who needed help, supporting a cause that mattered. That was the difference between us, really. Patricia wanted recognition, I wanted results. She measured worth in visibility, I measured it in impact. And tonight, for just a moment, those two metrics had collided in a way that let her see exactly how wrong she'd been. My phone buzzed again. A text from my father. "Please, let's talk soon. I want to understand." I typed back, "Okay, but on my terms this time." He responded immediately, "Fair enough. I'm sorry, sweetheart, for all of it." I pocketed the phone and kept walking, letting the cool night air clear my head, preparing mentally for tomorrow's briefing and the case that would demand my full attention. Behind me, the charity gala wound down, its participants slowly dispersing, carrying with them the story of the night's most surprising revelation. And ahead of me, my actual life waited, complex and demanding and meaningful in ways Patricia would never understand. I'd made my donation, both of them, the visible one and the real one. Now it was time to go home.